I've been a national park ranger for nearly 2 decades, and let me tell you, protocols have changed a lot in that time. I'm sharing this to keep folks safe the next time you head into the great outdoors. Let me tell you about the last park I worked at. I can't get too specific about the location or my job for obvious reasons. We had clusters of campsites we rotated yearly to keep any one area from getting worn out, giving nature a chance to recover. Winter had just passed, and with the big summer season a few months away, I was sent out to check the campsite's condition, deciding which ones needed a break and which could open up. Winters here are cold. Not many camp during that time, except for rugged masochists and Boy Scout troops led by folks who think they're rugged masochists. I didn't expect to find anything unusual. The first site was clear and ready. As I trekked to the next one, I spotted what looked like debris and junk down in a river valley. Looked like some jackasses had set up an unauthorized camp. Usually that means garbage and smoldering fires, a pain to clean up. I approached, seeing the wreckage of what must have been one hell of a party. Shit scattered everywhere, skeletons of tents still pitched, and blood. I stopped dead. Time stopped with me. Pools of blood spread across the ground next to signs of something heavy being dragged into the brush. I pulled my radio off my belt, then paused. Instead, I drew my Glock 22, racked around. I'm a certified law enforcement officer, but I hadn't needed my gun in ages. I scanned for movement, then got on the radio to call for backup. While waiting, I listened. Silence. Silence in nature's bad. Prey goes quiet when a predator's near. I hoped the birds were still because of me. Edging forward slowly, I looked for anyone or anything. A shredded plastic cooler, the tent annihilated with blood splattered on the walls and inside. People died here, I knew it. You can't lose that much blood and walk away. But no bodies. Shreds of clothes, some viscera, a drawing of all the flies buzzing around, but no people. I've seen bears rummage through camps, tearing apart anything edible. We got wild dogs here that cut trails through the deep brush, more dangerous than bears. But this wasn't either. The devastation was too much. Some scourge of God ripped through here, shredding everything. Backup arrived, and I was sent to report to headquarters. They even brought medics. Pointless, since there was no one to save. One of the new recruits vomited at the scene. Honestly, I was glad to get the hell out. Back at headquarters, it was chaos. Only 4 of us work here, but phones were ringing, printers humming, the air electric. The manager saw me and signaled me to his office. He looked pale, ashen, with bloodshot eyes. I sat by his desk, and he locked the door, something I'd never seen him do. He asked what I saw. I told him, uninterrupted. He looked even paler after, his hands trembling. A long pause followed. I expected questions, but he asked none. I left, hearing the door lock behind me. Minutes later, I heard him on a long, low phone call. I never saw him again. Word came down from above. We had a new manager, one who excelled at crisis. His first order? A controlled burn of the unauthorized camp and the sites closest to it. I didn't argue. I watched the smoke rise in the distance, praying that was the end of it. New orders came. Relocate the campsites closer to headquarters. Before that, we set up trail cameras at the new locations to ensure they weren't in nesting grounds. We also placed cameras along the hog trails through the brush for good measure. A couple of days later, we collected the footage. The new manager took it all, studying it in his office. Hours into reviewing, he lost it, screaming, yelling, calling up the chain, spitting curses. He spent the rest of the day and night in the office, phoning specialists and planners. Next morning, I showed up for a meeting. The manager looked like he hadn't slept. Massive changes were afoot. He laid out new plans, bright lampposts circling the park border, floodlights around the ranger station and campsites, which needed to move even closer, with clear lines of sight from the lights. I argued this defeated the point of camping if you're just walking through grass to set up where you can see the parking lot. He told me to shut up. That was just the start. The park now closed at sundown sharp. We were required to carry a long gun at all times. It's not uncommon for rangers to carry an AR-15 or Remington 870 shotgun in the deep woods, Wild rabid animals are out there. But the real concern, massive pot growers. Not your chill hide a few plants types, but large-scale suppliers who value privacy and hate law enforcement, or anti-government crazies who think we've got no right over them. Both groups are well-armed, don't like lawmen, and won't hesitate to take a shot at a ranger who stumbles into their fields. Even Elliot Ness, who took down Al Capone, got scared off busting Appalachian moonshiners because they sniped at him in the foothills. They shoot to kill. That's why we keep the big guns, not for routine patrols. I drew the short straw for the overnight shift. The manager said more protocol changes would come when I returned. Overnights used to be easy. Monitor radios, break up parties, check for poachers, ensure the forest didn't burn down. I clocked in, went to the gun cage. Things had changed. Our shotguns had new rifle barrels to handle solid slugs, the kind of firepower you'd use to stop a charging bear, God forbid. The AR-15s now had 30-round magazines instead of 15, and someone snuck in hollow point rounds. Makes no damn sense. In the woods, you need full metal jacket ammo, so rounds don't go wild hitting a twig. Hollow points are for tissue damage. This was ridiculous overkill. We're not a war zone. Next to the radio were new instructions. We couldn't respond directly to emergency calls. We could reply, assess the issue, then report to a new phone number I didn't recognize. Time passed slowly that night. I wasn't allowed to leave the building until sunup. A few uneventful nights passed. The new floodlights and lampposts were frying my eyes. It was so bright a blind man could see. A week later, some kids rolled in, grabbed their backpacks, and hiked up the ridge. I knew what they were up to. No one had booked a campsite that night, cheap young ones planning a raging party, no doubt. I waited for sundown, confirming they weren't on a day hike, then called my manager to report. He told me to call the new number. A curt voice answered, asked my park, paused, then asked the issue. I reported the kids on an unauthorized site, asked if I should break it up. I could see their campfire on the ridge. No. Do not leave the building. Do not attempt communication. Report any developments. Right after daybreak, the manager arrived early. Have you seen them? Did they leave? The car was still there. Let them rest, probably hungover, I said. He cursed non-stop, went inside to make a call. I was outside, looking up the ridge, when he exited the station. What a 15 in hand, another strapped to his back, Glock on his hip. He grabbed a jerrycan of gasoline from his car and marched toward the ridge. I tried asking what the hell he was doing. No reply. I considered following but thought better of it. I called a number. Same curt voice, same direct questions. I reported the manager, heading to the campsite, armed to the teeth, carrying gasoline. What do I do? Stay there. Do not interfere. Backup is inbound. Report any developments. About then, I saw smoke rising from the ridge. 2 vans screamed into the lot. A dozen heavily armored men exited with military precision. I went out. Who are you? What's going on? The commander, exiting last, asked, which direction did he go? I pointed at the rising smoke. The men fanned out, jogging up the ridge, rifles cocking. I shouted after them, no response. The vans were nondescript, marked only DOI response team. Half an hour later, they returned, dragging the manager in zip ties. He screamed. I did what needed to be done. It's worse than they thought. We can't stop this. Burn it all. They threw him in the back, sedated him. The commander approached me, my neck bristling with fear. I need the office. All computers, hard drives, videotapes. I unlocked the doors. They ransacked the place. Reports from years past. Videotapes bagged up, held by the commander himself. He studied the gun cage. Cute. You're out of your league, he scoffed. They took everything. The commander told me, call the number. Tell them it's contained. You need a new superior. Don't talk about this. They left. On cue, the fire brigade and more vans arrived. The fire was contained. News reports called rumors of missing campers unsubstantiated. The manager's switch was chalked up to bureaucracy. The press died down in a week. The new manager was good with them. With no campers and shorter hours, we rebuilt the station and set up new campsites, practically spitting distance from the station. Nothing dramatic happened for a few days. Then, on a whim, the manager had us set up cameras around the station and campsites. Usually, with so much human activity, you'd see raccoons or a rare hungry bear. We set them up. A couple of days later, we collected the footage. I played poker with a rookie while the manager watched hours of empty, illuminated parking lot footage. Then he hit the station footage. Screams came from the office. We barged in. He was stomping on the camera hard drives, gibbering. They told me it was cleaned. Safe. No recent activity. It's here. He barked at us to leave. Later, he made a call. The rookie eavesdropped, reporting the manager demanded a transfer, saying they lied, didn't do their jobs, and he wasn't equipped. Then the phone clicked, followed by sobbing. Hours later, the manager exited, shoulders slumped, defeated. We cut hours further. Weekends only, full staff then, skeleton crew otherwise. Campers had to check into the closest sites or leave. We couldn't leave the station after dark. In emergencies, number 911, call the number and follow orders. We drew straws for overnights. Why we needed to stay overnight without doing anything was beyond me. I asked the manager. He said protocol required someone to report irregularities. On my overnight, I kept my phone close, the number dialed, ready. It was a bad night. I paced with my shotgun, glancing into the floodlights, trying to see beyond. Crickets chirped, relaxing me, preys quiet when predators are around. It was a long night. Next night, the manager drew the short straw. He seemed resigned. We all had to take a turn. He brought the brightest tactical flashlight I'd ever seen, saying he bought it because he's afraid of the dark. He wasn't. He was afraid of what's in the dark. At 3 a.m., he called. Get here now. Bring guns. You've got an arsenal. I screwed up. They're attracted to the light. I called a number. They said backup won't be here till morning. Oh shit. Gunshots rang out, a pause, more shots, screaming, scuffling. Then the line went dead. I called a number. A new, terse voice. I just spoke with him. What can you report? Something bad happened. I heard gunshots. We'll have backup there ASAP. Did he say anything else? He said they're attracted to the light. Interesting. Thank you. The park is now closed. You'll be reassigned. Goodbye. Officially, the park closed for a controlled burn. Let old trees die. Make room for new ones. Nothing in the report about the manager on duty. The public thought bureaucracies needed shaking up. No one asked more. I got transferred to a new park halfway across the country. Nice scenery, beautiful, but odd rules. Don't go far after dark. Don't carry a flashlight. I'm concerned about why we can't use flashlights at night when you need one. They won't tell me. Please, everyone, be safe out there. My friends and I have been hiking and backpacking for years, hitting the trails at least once annually for a solid multi-day trip. We've revisited some spots multiple times, and aside from the occasional car trouble or someone forgetting proper gear, we've never had real issues. This particular trip was a tough one. 6 miles in, 6 miles out, with a 6,000-foot elevation change both ways, leading to a lake in northern New Mexico. We planned it for October, bracing for bitter cold, possibly below freezing at night. There were just 3 of us, and we were ready. I was probably the least equipped of the trio, but I knew I'd be fine. The trekking took all day, but we reached the lake without a hitch. We set up camp, soaked in the sounds of nature, played some games, and shared a couple pints of whiskey by the fire. As night fell, we settled into our sleeping arrangements, me in a small tent, my friend in a hammock right next to me, maybe 10 feet away, near the fire pit, and our other friend about 100 feet off in his own tent. I had trouble sleeping, feeling restless. Even though I was warm, I kept getting shivers and tossing in my sleeping bag. I chalked it up to the cold and didn't think much of it. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional buzz of insects or a bird fluttering from a tree. Eventually, I started to drift off. That's when I was jolted awake by my friend's voice, clear as day, calling my name. Help, help me. Groggy and confused, I froze. He sounded desperate, repeating, Kieran, help me. Before I could respond, I heard it again. Kieran, help. I have to pee. Then came a laugh, a giggle I'd known since we met years ago. Unmistakably his. I muttered, piss off, man, I'm trying to sleep, thinking he was pulling a prank. Looking back, it was out of character for him to wake me just to mess around, but half asleep, I brushed it off. Something fell off, though. I ignored it and told him to go do his business. He kept at it. Help, I need you. Come out here. I grumbled about sleeping and told him to go pee already. My memory's fuzzy on the exact exchange, but after a bit, the voice stopped. I noticed he hadn't made any noise. No rustling to leave or climb back into his hammock. I figured he'd gone quietly and let it go. Then I realized I had to pee badly and wouldn't sleep until I did. I crawled out of my tent and walked over to his hammock, planning to jokingly wake him like he'd done to me. I called his name, mimicking his tone, but when he woke, he was instantly thrown off. I said I was just going to pee, like he'd told me 15 minutes earlier. He had no idea what I was talking about. I pressed him, asking if he'd been outside my tent. He swore he'd been asleep in his hammock the whole time, never getting up. Chills ran down my spine. Whatever was outside my tent, mimicking his voice in that high-pitched, mocking tone, saying, help me, I have to pee, come out here, wasn't him. I played it off, saying it was nothing, and went to pee, keeping my eyes on my surroundings. Back in my tent, I warmed up and got drowsy, despite the terror. I'm familiar with the lore of northern New Mexico, and I know I wouldn't be the first to vanish without a trace if I'd followed that voice. Somehow, I shook it off and started drifting again. That's when it tried to get me. In that half-awake state, where you feel like you're falling and jolt awake, I wasn't falling. Something grabbed my tent and dragged it at what felt like 50 miles an hour across the forest floor. I felt every bump, tree stumps, rocks, tearing the tent, thrashing me around as I was pulled through dense trees in a straight line, which made no sense given the forest layout. I screamed, but barely any sound came out. It felt like I'd been dragged hundreds of feet. Then I opened my eyes. I was lying in my tent, undisturbed, unharmed. Everything looked the same, but that dragging felt so real, not like a dream. I called out to my friend, feeling bad for waking him but needing to confirm reality. He groggily responded, sounding genuine, unlike the voice earlier. I realized whatever had called me before was nothing like him. That high-pitched, whiny mimicry, saying, help me, I have to pee, come out here, still haunts me. The next morning, I asked him about it. He laughed, swearing he hadn't gotten up or said anything. Whatever it was targeted me specifically. My friends have gone back, but I skipped that trip. To whatever was out there, let's not meet again. One day, I matched with a guy on Tinder. Our conversation got a bit spicy, so I gave him my number to keep chatting. We texted that night, but it wasn't anything too intense. No photos, no nudes, no plans to meet up. The conversation fizzled out, and I forgot about him. Weeks passed, and I deleted our chat history. Then, late one night, I got a lewd photo from a number I didn't recognize. It was some guy I didn't know. I thought about firing off an insult, but decided to just delete it and move on. A few weeks later, another one showed up. Curious, I checked my deleted messages to make sure I didn't know the sender. Sure enough, it was the Tinder guy. It was creepy that he texted me out of the blue with explicit images after a month of no contact. Gross. So, I blocked his number. A couple of weeks later, I got a lewd video on my Apple Watch. It was the same guy. I was baffled. How was he messaging my watch if I'd blocked him? I blocked him again on the watch, thinking what a weirdo. A week or so after that, I left my apartment for a walk. As I stepped outside, I saw him. He was right there, walking toward me in front of my building. He was wearing the same outfit as in his Tinder profile, complete with the same tattoos and hat. I was certain it was him. I never told him where I lived. I freaked out but tried to stay calm. I was dressed in baggy clothes and had recently changed my hair color, so I kept my head down, hoping he wouldn't recognize me. I walked right past him, too scared to look at his face or check if he noticed me. I didn't dare glance back to see where he went, just kept moving forward. My heart was racing, but nothing happened after that. I never saw him again. I racked my brain trying to figure out how he found me. I never shared my address, so my best guess is he used my phone number to track me down somehow. It's unsettling to think it was just some random guy I texted for one day on Tinder. Even with the creepy photos and videos, I initially thought he was just a typical perv. I never expected him to show up at my apartment. He didn't even try to text or meet up normally, just sent those images over 2 months and then appeared. It's so bizarre and random. I'm pretty sure his intentions were something twisted, and it still gives me the creeps to think about what he wanted. I'm just glad he left me alone after that. Now, I never give out my real phone number to dates anymore. To the Tinder stalker, let's never meet again. This happened 11 years ago when I was 19, working at a gas station that was part of a regional chain. 2 guys, both Marines, were regulars at the store. One of them, of Asian descent, would always try to flirt with me. I'd play oblivious, keep it professional, and move on with my day. After they'd been coming in for a while, he started asking me out. This guy was 35, I knew because I carded him for cigarettes. Our store was strict about checking IDs for everyone. I said no and kept it polite, asking if he needed anything else. He didn't stop. Every time he came in, he'd ask me out again, and each rejection seemed to frustrate him more. His body language would shift, tense shoulders, a scowl, and his whole vibe would change when I turned him down. I told my manager he was making me uncomfortable, but she brushed it off, saying to treat all customers with respect. I felt dismissed but kept doing my job. A couple months later, my friend was browsing Craigslist for a used car and decided to check the missed connections section for a laugh. That section doesn't exist anymore, but back then, it was like a dating board where people posted about someone they saw but didn't get to talk to. Lo and behold, there was a post with my name, the name of the store, and the town. I don't have a super common first name, and I was the only one with that name at the store. We had to wear name tags, so it was definitely about me. The post described seeing me at work, saying I was pretty, and wanting to take me on a date. I was creeped out. I showed my dad, and he was livid. He emailed the guy through the listing, telling him to piss off. I printed the post and showed my boss, hoping she'd take it seriously. Instead, she told me to just go on a date with him, and then say I wasn't interested. I was furious. Her response was absurd and completely unhelpful. About a week later, the guy's friend came into the store alone. These were big guys, Marines, not small by any means. I rang him up, and out of nowhere, he snapped at me, "What's your damn problem? You don't want to go out with my friend because he's Asian? He really likes you, you racist." I was stunned but stood my ground. I told him I wasn't going out with his friend because he was 35 and harassing me. That was the last time I saw either of them. A week after that, I got fired. No reason given, just let go. I found another job waiting tables and moved on. Years later, I learned my manager was fired for wrongful termination. Apparently, she had a habit of canning people she didn't like for personal reasons. I hope she never has a daughter. To the Marine who harassed me, let's never meet again. A few months ago, I was watching a YouTube video where a creator shared, "Let's not meet" stories about creepy encounters with landlords or hostile owners, and it jogged my memory about an unsettling experience I had. It's not as terrifying as some stories out there, but the video made me paranoid, and it's why I decided to leave that Airbnb. I'd rather not end up as the victim in a true crime story. This happened in January or February of 2024, if I recall correctly. I was visiting family in southern France, and for personal reasons I won't get into, didn't want to stay at their place, even though they offered. I visit them often, usually on short notice, so I never book the same place twice. Sometimes I opt for a hotel, which is pricier but more private, as I'm not big on socializing with hosts. When I book Airbnbs, I always look for flats or studios, not rooms in someone's house, because I prefer to be on my own. That's a key criterion for me. I booked an Airbnb within walking distance of my family's place. It looked nice online, marketed as a house or ground floor flat with access to a yard and garden. It was one of the cheaper options, which suited me fine since I wasn't there for luxury or leisure, just convenience. There weren't many reviews, but the few it had were positive. When I arrived with my suitcase, I waited outside the house for the landlord to hand over the keys. He was late. I stood there for at least an hour, trying to stay patient. The neighborhood seemed nice and safe, though I had to walk through some sketchy areas to get there from my relative's place. Finally, the landlord showed up. He seemed like a decent guy and apologized profusely, saying he'd been in another town visiting his cousin or friends and lost track of time. First red flag, he casually mentioned they'd been drinking, and he hadn't sobered up fully, so he sped down the highway on his motorbike to get back. He half-jokingly asked me not to mention that in my review. I got serious and told him he shouldn't drink and drive. He brushed it off, saying he didn't want to keep me waiting longer. I said I wouldn't mention it in the review, spoiler, I did, but I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. He was otherwise friendly, chatty, and seemed trustworthy. Then came the second red flag. He explained I'd be staying in a small flat attached to the larger house where he lived, but assured me I'd have my own space. Bathroom, kitchen, the works. I wasn't thrilled about this, as I thought it was a standalone place. Still, as a paranoid solo traveler, I figured it might be reassuring to have someone nearby in case something happened. God, was I wrong? He showed me around. The place was old but fine for my needs, as I wasn't after luxury. My part of the house was on a lower level, not quite a basement, but I had to walk down outdoor stairs to enter through the backyard. This was most noticeable in the bedroom, where the windows sat at ground level. The next yellow flag came when he pointed out a connecting door near the bedroom that linked my flat to his house. I'd half expected something like this, but thought he'd at least have to cross the yard or use the front door to access my space. He said the door was locked and stayed closed, not as a warning to me, but more like, it's there, but it's useless to you. We chatted longer than I wanted. I was tired, still annoyed about his tardiness, and not in the mood to socialize. He gave me his phone number, saying WhatsApp was easier than Airbnb's chat feature, and then left. I started settling in, unpacking my suitcase and changing before heading to visit my family. That evening, I returned to the Airbnb and decided to shower. I think what happened next was before the shower because I remember locking the bathroom door, which I never do when I'm alone and feeling anxious. The biggest red flag hit while I was sitting on the bed. I heard a knock and someone saying my name. 2 seconds later, before I could respond or process where it was coming from, I heard keys turning in a lock and a door opening. It was the connecting door next to the bedroom. The landlord walked in, saying he couldn't find his phone and thought he might have left it downstairs. I was stunned, especially since if he'd come 10 minutes later, I could have been naked or in a towel, thinking I was alone. I know it might sound like I'm overreacting, but I'm a young woman alone in a house with a man in his 40s or 50s who could enter my space whenever he wanted. I stayed polite and said I hadn't seen his phone. I'd have noticed, as there was nothing in the room but my open suitcase on the couch. He still walked around, talking fast and a lot, while I sat there, barely processing and unable to ask him to leave. He looked around, didn't find the phone, apologized, and asked if I'd had dinner or if everything was okay before leaving. At that point, I was seriously questioning whether to stay. I knew Airbnb's refund policy only covered cancellations 2 nights in advance, so I'd likely lose money for that night and the next. It was already around 11 p.m. I tried checking for hotel rooms, but it was too late and everything was booked. I decided to shower quickly, worried he'd hear the water and come back claiming he forgot something else. Nothing happened, though. I went back to the bedroom, got dressed fast just in case, and sat down to think. That's when I noticed the chairs in the room. There were 2, and one had ropes tied around the armrests. The chairs were in good shape, and the ropes weren't there to fix anything. They were just loosely tied. To this day, I have no idea why they were there. I considered sleeping there for the night and reassessing in the morning, hoping I'd feel less paranoid. I tried using a chair to block the bedroom door handle, like in the movies, but it didn't work. I tried both chairs, even stacking them and using the ropes, but the handle could still move enough to open the door. I figured if I left them in front of the door, I'd at least hear if someone tried to enter, but the door opened outward, so it wouldn't matter. I didn't know what I'd do even if I heard someone. I'm paranoid and anxious, especially living abroad alone. My motto is to never take risks with my safety, as I'm usually the only one who can protect myself. I don't avoid going out, but I don't get drunk around strangers, and I take cabs if I feel unsafe walking home late. The city I live in now is fairly safe, but bad encounters aren't uncommon for most women, so I'm always cautious. To an outsider, this might seem like a friendly landlord who's just overly social, and the ropes could be a random detail. But to my anxious self, it felt like the setup for a horror movie where you yell at the naive victim to get out before it's too late. So I called my brother, who picked me up around midnight. I spent the rest of my trip at his place. To the Airbnb landlord, let's not meet again. A few weeks ago, I was driving through the middle of nowhere to visit a friend. My wife was asleep in the passenger seat. My teenage daughters were watching a movie in the back, and my toddler was playing with his toys next to them. It was around 1 a.m., and I was feeling uneasy. The drive seemed to drag on forever. The dirt roads, pitch black with no lights, gave me chills. All I could see were endless fields stretching out around us. The road was rough, full of potholes, and I was focused on dodging them as best I could. Out of nowhere, I spotted a piece of luggage sitting in the middle of the road, right in my lane. On the opposite side, a car was parked, completely dark. No interior or exterior lights. I didn't want to drive over the luggage, so my first instinct was to get out and move it. I was lucky to have my wife with me. She grabbed my hand and pointed to the right. There, in the field, was a person staring at something on their phone, the screen's glow giving them away. That's when I got a bad feeling. I turned the car around, ready to get off that road. As I did, two people jumped out from the field, right in front of us. The road was narrow, leaving no room to swerve without hitting them. So now there were two people blocking my path, the luggage and parked car ahead, and the person with the phone in the field behind us. I didn't know what to do. Panicked, I spun the car back around, facing the luggage again, and made a split-second decision. I drove right over it. Thankfully, it was empty or light enough not to damage the car. We sped away, unharmed, and made it to my friend's house. The rest of the trip was great, and we had a good time. But I still get chills thinking about that night. It felt like a setup, like those people were waiting for someone to stop. To the strangers in the field, let's never meet again. In late fall of 2010, my dad, mom, sister, uncle, and I decided to hike to the Goat Canyon Trestle, a massive wooden bridge-like structure built in the early 1900s for a now-abandoned railroad. Located deep in the desert of San Diego County, Southern California, near the Mexico border, it's one of the tallest freestanding wooden structures in the world. Back then, there was little information online about how to reach it, and my uncle, who was obsessed with remote, abandoned sites, had to dig deep to plan the route. There was no established trail, and you had to forge your own path across rocky desert hills. We chose Thanksgiving weekend for the hike when my sister and I were home from college, and the cooler temperatures made it feasible. We parked in a barren, middle-of-nowhere spot surrounded by desert. My uncle said we'd need to climb the hills ahead, then descend through a canyon that the trestle spanned. The hike started fine, but the lack of a trail made it tough. The terrain was rocky, with loose slate and sand that sent you slipping. Within hours, I'd fallen multiple times, scraping my knees and hands. Scrambling over rocks to reach the hills took way longer and more energy than we expected. We started around 9 or 10 a.m., but by the time we hit the hilltops, it was mid-afternoon. We still had to descend the canyon to the trestle and make it back before sunset around 5 p.m. My parents worried we wouldn't have enough daylight to reach the trestle and return. They suggested turning back, but my uncle was determined to at least see it from the canyon's edge. He offered to go alone while we headed back. Being the young, invincible-minded guy I was, I convinced my parents to let me go with him. My uncle and I were faster hikers, and we figured we could make it to the trestle and back in time. We split up, and my uncle and I pressed on toward the canyon. Here's some context about the area. The The trestle is close to the Mexico border, along abandoned tracks running between Yuma, Arizona, and San Diego, roughly parallel to the border. Back then, this was a known route for illegal immigrants crossing into the U.S. My uncle had read stories about people hiding in the abandoned train tunnels to avoid border patrol during the day, then walking the tracks at night. The area was also a hot spot for coyotes and mules, not the animals, but people smuggling immigrants or drugs. Border patrol was active too. As we continued through the hills, things got strange. We came across a small grove of fan palms, short, stocky trees with thick fronds covering the trunk, about 8 to 10 feet tall. The grove felt eerie, like something was watching us from behind the fronds. I was relieved when we moved past it. Eventually, we found a canyon we thought led to the trestle. It was rugged, with loose rocks making the descent a nightmare. We slipped and slid the whole way down. About halfway, the sun began to set, casting the canyon in shadows. An eerie quiet settled in, and it started getting cold. That's when we both started seeing things. We swore we saw my mom at the top of the canyon, looking down at us. My uncle joked that she'd never let me go alone and must have followed us. We kept going, but when we looked back, no one was there. We figured she'd stepped behind a rock and called out to her, but got no response. I was a bit freaked out and told my uncle we should turn back, but he insisted we were close. He was right. Around the next bend, we saw the trestle ahead. It was impressive, but we were still a good way from the base, let alone climbing it, which was our original plan. My uncle, the adventurous nut, wanted to keep going, but I stumbled and badly sprained my ankle. I couldn't go further. He finally agreed to turn back, but said he'd go a bit farther alone to snap some photos, then we'd head back together. So there I was, alone in the darkening canyon, nursing my ankle. I glanced up to see if my mom was visible again. Nothing at first, but then something large moved out of the corner of my eye, darting between rocks. A wave of dread hit me, like I was being watched from every shadow. It was unnaturally quiet. My uncle returned, and we started the slow climb back up the canyon. It was pitch black now, with just a sliver of sunset left. I was freaking out, knowing we'd be walking in total darkness. Near the top, my uncle stopped and pointed. There was my mom again, standing at the canyon's edge, staring down. We yelled, but she didn't move or respond. We kept going, thinking she couldn't hear us, but when we rounded the next bend, she was gone. I was losing it, and I'm not sure how I'd have handled it without my uncle there. We reached the top, completely alone in the dark desert hills. My uncle had a small headlamp, which we used to follow our faint path back. The darkness was oppressive, like I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. As we passed the fan palm grove again, I was terrified. Those trees felt like silent sentinels. I remembered the uneasy feeling from earlier, like something was lurking in the fronds. As we walked through, a loud rustle came from one of the trees, too big for a rodent or reptile. My uncle swung the headlamp, but nothing was there. Seconds later, another rustle from behind. Again, nothing. Then I felt something shove me hard, away from the palm I was near. I crashed into the dirt, certain something had reached through the fronds and pushed me. I didn't hear any rustling despite being so close. I yelled to my uncle that something had pushed me from inside the tree. He checked with the headlamp, peering into the fronds, but found nothing. We hurried out of the grove and kept moving through the hills. Every so often, I heard rustling behind or beside us, but with no light, I couldn't tell what it was. It felt like something was trailing just outside the headlamp's beam, where we couldn't see it. Finally, we made it through the hills and started descending toward the car. In the distance, we saw a faint light approaching. Nervous about whether it was friend or foe, we cautiously moved toward it. Thankfully, it was a border patrol agent looking for us. He found my family waiting at the car, and my parents had told him we were still out there. He led us back, where my mom rushed to hug me and scold my uncle. We told her we'd seen her at the canyon's top and asked why she didn't wait or respond. My stomach sank when she said she'd never gone farther after turning back with my dad and sister. They'd been at the car for hours. I don't know what or who we saw in that canyon or what was in those fan palms, but we weren't alone that night. Maybe it was our minds playing tricks, but 14 years later, I still think about it. To whatever was out there, let's not meet again. This memory resurfaced recently, part of some healing I've been doing that's brought back buried moments like this one. A few years ago, I was living in a new city, still pretty fresh to being on my own. My housing plans fell apart at the last minute, so I had to scramble to find a place. You guessed it, random roommates. The year before, I'd had a random roommate who turned out to be amazing and became a great friend, so I figured this would be similar. It wasn't, but that's not the main point of this story. I was living in a big old house with 3 roommates. Ben, who I knew a bit from the previous year and was starting to become friends with, and Tom and Mike, who were new to me. The house was split by floors, with the top level separated by a locked door at the stairs, which is important. Ben and I lived upstairs while Tom and Mike were downstairs. I've always been paranoid, and for good reason, so I'm strict about locking doors when I'm home, when I leave, even my bedroom door when I sleep. This happened in the first couple of days after moving in. We'd all hung out to get to know each other, but Tom and Mike hadn't fully moved in yet. Both had a lot of expensive stuff like 5-figure electronics and gear. I was home alone, with Ben at work and Tom and Mike coming in and out, moving their things. I was supposed to be somewhere else that day, which they knew, but the plans got canceled last minute, so no one would have expected me to be home. I was in my bedroom, door locked, with both entrances to our upstairs section locked, watching something on my laptop. Suddenly, I heard a lot of noise from downstairs. Doors opening, cabinets banging, furniture being moved. I assumed it was Tom or Mike until I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. My heart started racing. They had no reason to come upstairs, especially knowing Ben and I were supposed to be gone. The footsteps got closer, heading toward the locked door at the top of the stairs. I froze, sitting as still as I could. Then the doorknob started to jiggle. I could hear it clearly since my room was right by the entryway. I was in full panic mode now. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering that someone was in my house, trying not to give away that I was there. The house was near downtown, and cops arrived in minutes, but those were the longest minutes of my life. By the time they got there, whoever it was had fled. The downstairs was completely trashed, like something out of a movie, surreal to see. They'd stolen over $20,000 worth of electronics, I think, though I don't recall the exact amount. Furniture was broken, plates smashed, even mattresses ripped apart. It turned out Tom and Mike had left a door unlocked while moving, which is how the thieves got in. That was the last time something like this happened before I moved out. The intruders were gone before the police arrived, but I spent months terrified they'd come back. Looking back, that became the least of my worries later on. I'm so glad I always lock my doors. Seeing how the downstairs looked, I don't know what they would have done to me if they'd gotten through that locked door. To whoever was on the other side, let's not meet again. A few years ago, my husband and I were at a gas station late at night. It was an odd spot where 2 roads met at a sharp angle, with the station tucked into the corner. We pulled up to a pump with no working lights, making it hard to see from either road. We were in our soft-top Jeep Wrangler with all the rear windows off. My husband got out to pump gas, and I stayed in the passenger seat, scrolling on my phone. That's when I heard it. "I'm not going to hurt you." The voice was wavery, coming from some distance behind me. I froze, instantly terrified. I turned to look through the open back where the window should have been and saw what looked like a homeless man a little ways off. He had wild gray hair, a faded beanie, and an oversized jacket with lots of pockets that hid his hands. The darkness hit me, nobody could see us clearly, and I couldn't see what he was holding. A gut feeling screamed, "Run," but we were just pumping gas. He was probably just a weird homeless guy, right? We'd lived in Key West, where we'd seen plenty of harmless folks like him, so I tried to calm down. I turned back to my phone, ignoring him. But I could still hear him, shuffling feet, the rustle of his jacket. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "I just need some help. Do you have any money?" "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was closer now, almost at the Jeep. We'd only been there a couple of minutes, and the tank wasn't full yet. Without warning, my husband jumped into the driver's seat, hand shaking as he fumbled to start the engine. He threw the Jeep into drive, and we peeled out, leaving the gas nozzle dangling. He hadn't even hung it up. As we sped away, I looked back and saw the man standing there, motionless, next to the pump. My husband turned to me and said, "I just had the most horrible feeling." Something told me to run. I stared at him, horrified, and told him I felt the exact same thing. Tears welled up as I thanked him for trusting his instincts. We drove home, shaken, replaying the moment over and over. A day or two later, we watched a YouTube video by security analyst Scott Stewart about the Kenyan Mall shooting. He said that in every incident like that, some people report having a terrible feeling right before it happens. Some listen and leave, while others regret ignoring it. I burst into tears, knowing that feeling all too well. I'd had it and ignored it, but my husband hadn't. I was crying, thanking him for listening to that sense of danger. Maybe the guy was harmless, just asking for money in a creepy way, and nothing would have happened. But I can't stop thinking about how the station's weird angles hid us from view, how dark it was, and how his hands were hidden in those pockets. I still get chills remembering him saying, "I'm not going to hurt you." The lesson I took away is simple. If you ever get that gut feeling that something bad is coming, get out. It might be a false alarm, maybe just anxiety, but it's better than living with the regret of not listening. To the man at the gas station, let's not meet again. Growing up in rural Alaska, I've experienced plenty of strange things. Herds of caribou, surreal landscapes, you name it. But the weirdest moments are the times I heard yelling or hollering from sources I couldn't see. I often traveled alone through the Brooks Range and up to the North Slope to hunt and trap. From a young age, I learned to hunt field dress animals, build survival shelters, and navigate at night using the constellations, just like my ancestors. These long, grueling journeys sometimes brought me face to face with more than I was ready to handle. In the winter of 2017, I was checking a trap line along the left side of a valley, heading north. I had traps set every few miles and was moving along my trail on my snow machine when I spotted a figure among some diamond willows about a mile ahead. It looked like a person walking, which was odd for January, the coldest time of year. Who'd be out here just strolling? Then the figure vanished. I pulled out my binoculars and scanned the area, but saw nothing. I figured it was my imagination, or maybe someone with a snow machine who'd sped off, so I kept going. At the next trap, I stopped and turned off my machine. It was calm and surprisingly warm for January, around -30 degrees Fahrenheit, so I shed my parka to reset a spring trap. As I worked, I heard a low bellowing noise coming from up in the small valley. It started like a person shouting, but grew deeper, almost like a bear warning off arrival. But it was January, nothing like that should be out. The most you'd see were wolves, wolverines, or caribou. Even moose head south this time of year. I tried to ignore it and focus on the trap, but the noise came again, louder and deeper. I remembered the figure I'd seen and wondered if it was connected, but I followed my elder's advice, don't dwell on strange sounds, just keep working. Then I felt eyes on me. I looked toward the valley where the sensation came from. Nothing. I checked with my binoculars, still nothing. The bellowing started again, even louder. On instinct, I mimicked the sound back, letting out a deep yell. The noise stopped instantly, like it recognized my response. Everything went silent. Uneasy, I packed up fast and left. I haven't been back to that spot since. I pulled the trap line that winter and have no plans to return. Whatever was out there making those sounds, I don't want to know. To the source of that hollering, let's not meet again. This happened just this summer, and I'm only now getting around to writing it down. I call myself an outdoorsman, having grown up in the sticks, spending much of my life wandering and enjoying the backcountry. Now, I'm older, settled in the suburbs with a wife, 2 boys, a house, a dog, and a desk job, whole suburban package. I want my kids to have the opportunities that come with suburban life, but I also want them to grow up appreciating the outdoors. So, when my oldest son was old enough for his first solo father-son camping trip, I was thrilled. My wife and younger son stayed home for this midsummer adventure, meant to be a bonding experience for me and my 5-year-old. Since he's so young, I didn't want anything too extreme. We needed a spot that wasn't too deep in the Colorado Front Range, but still allowed for dispersed camping. I don't consider RV parks or established campgrounds real camping. You might as well stay in a motel watching TV. Real camping is a tent, a sleeping bag, and a fire. A dispersed camping area called Gordon Gulch, west of Boulder, caught my eye. I'd never been there before. It had no facilities, and it was remote enough that you couldn't see or hear other campers. Perfect. My son and I had a blast that day. We set up camp, collected firewood, went for a hike, spotted a moose and a bobcat, tried fishing, and returned to our campsite as the sunlight faded to light a fire. We had a classic camping meal, hot dogs, and marshmallows roasted over the flames. It was a great day, a core memory for both of us, and what I thought would be the perfect first camping trip for a preschooler. Or so I thought. After all that fun, we were exhausted and ready for bed. The sound of the summer breeze through the pines was better than any sleep aid. I don't even remember falling asleep. Just a deep, dreamless slumber that only physical exertion brings. One thing about my son, he inherited a lot from me: hair color, eye shape, disposition, and our unusually wide feet. But he got his mother's habit of sleep talking. It's not uncommon to hear him having full conversations in his sleep, especially when he's overtired. I was yanked out of that void of sleep, unsure what woke me. I sat up, gathering my bearings. The world seemed calm, just me and the breeze in the treetops. I couldn't pinpoint what had stirred me. Then my son's laughter cut through my groggy haze, a deep belly laugh like he was having a fun dream. I smiled, gently rocked him to quiet him down, and settled back to sleep. But he burst out laughing again. I sighed, figuring he'd calm down soon. Then he laughed a third time, and this time it was echoed by something outside the tent. I held my breath, listening. It wasn't an echo. Something out there was laughing in sync with my son. My grogginess vanished as adrenaline kicked in. It couldn't be real. It had to be my imagination. I sat up, straining to hear. Nothing. After a minute, my muscles relaxed, and I started to lie back down, convincing myself I'd misheard. Then my son laughed again, and the laughter outside answered. I was now certain it wasn't an echo. As I tried to make sense of it, a voice from outside called my son's name. My blood ran cold. The voice was so familiar. It sounded like my younger son, who was miles away, safe at home with my wife. I heard twigs crunching beyond the tent's thin nylon walls, circling us. Unprompted, the voice called again, mimicking my toddler's tone, asking my son to come play. It sounded cold, hollow, lifeless. Adrenaline flooded my system, sweat beading on my face. I was terrified, but my primal instincts roared to life. Nothing was going to hurt my son. I was in full Papa Bear mode, ready to stop whatever this was. When you're camping miles from civilization, you don't take chances. Wild animals, wild people, you have to be prepared. I almost always bring a firearm when I camp. Pepper spray and bear bells are fine, but nothing gets a conscious threat's attention like the sound of a round chambering. I shouted into the night that I had a gun and was coming out, hoping my fear was masked by aggression. The only reply was the breeze in the trees. My son was still fast asleep, a heavy sleeper like his mom. We joke he could sleep through a tornado. I stepped into the cool summer night, gun in one hand, flashlight in the other. The campsite looked normal. The fire was down to embers, our fishing gear leaned against the truck, and the firewood was neatly stacked. Not wanting to stray far from my sleeping son, I sat by the tent entrance, waiting. Deep in the trees, I heard a branch snap, then another, closer. I stood and flashed my light toward the sound. Nothing. Then the voice called out from behind, "Daddy, Daddy," and my younger son's voice crying for me. I swung the light and caught a pair of shimmering green eyes, only 2 feet off the ground, toddler height. I took a step closer, needing to see more. The eyes didn't blink, staying fixed on me. Getting closer didn't help. The thing seemed to absorb the light, swallowing it except for those glowing eyes. I couldn't make out its size, shape, or color. It laughed again, a hollow toddler's laugh, now with malice. The eyes shifted from green to amber, and I watched as they rose, like the thing was standing up from a crouch. They stopped nearly 10 feet off the ground. A deep growl erupted, vibrating in my gut. I couldn't see a mouth, but I heard teeth snapping. My son screamed from the tent, and the eyes flicked toward him, the only time they left me. I reacted on instinct, firing my gun into the air. The eyes vanished instantly. My ears rang, but I heard the growl turn to shrieks, followed by crashing branches and undergrowth as it fled deep into the trees. I stood there until the sounds faded, left with only the breeze and my son's quiet sobs. Twilight was creeping in, illuminating the forest. Shaking and exhausted, I sat in the dirt by the tent, trying to pull myself together. "Daddy, Daddy, where are you?" My son shouted, snapping me out of my daze. I went to him, scooped him up, and put him in the truck, locking the doors. I broke camp in record time, and we were on the road by sunrise. I have no idea what was in those woods. I do plan to camp there again, but without my family and with friends to learn more about this thing. My son wasn't fazed. He thinks I chased off a bear, and maybe he's right. I hope so. He's eager for another camping trip, but I'm leaning toward an RV park or motel for the next family outing. To whatever was out there, let's not meet again. Town carved out of bushland, home to a lot of elderly folks, so it's always been a safe place. I guess that's why I've never felt the need to be overly cautious. Looking back, that sense of security probably made me a bit naive, thinking that while something bad could happen, it was so unlikely it wasn't worth worrying about. At 15, I was head over heels for my boyfriend, who lived quite a distance away. Since I couldn't drive, public transport was my only way to see him. Every weekend, I walked 20 minutes from my house to the bus stop, catch a bus into the city, then hop on a train to his place. It was the same routine every week, and I felt perfectly safe doing it alone. I only got to see him once a week, so I'd leave early in the morning, stay until pretty late, and then head home. Since it was late when I left his place, and public transport ran less frequently at that hour, it didn't make sense for my boyfriend to come partway back with me. It'd just waste time. So every week, I made the trip home by myself. One particular night, after visiting him, I was on the train back to the city, just like always. I got to the bus station, which is this big, open building with an upper level and platforms down below where the buses pull in. I was sitting on a bench on the upper level, right in front of the stairs leading down to the platform I needed for my bus home. I don't remember many people being around, maybe one or two passing by, but it was pretty much deserted because of the late hour. Oh, and a side note, since I was visiting my boyfriend, I dressed up to look nice for him. I had on a decent casual dress, my long hair was straightened and neat, and I was wearing these high platform boots I'd gotten for my birthday. I thought they were super cool, and they were fun to wear since they made me feel less short. Anyway, I was rummaging through my bag for some gum when I noticed someone sit down on the bench next to me. Normally, when someone sits on a bench that's already occupied, they leave a bit of a gap, right? But this guy sat right beside me, even though the whole bench was free. When I looked up from my bag, I saw a man, maybe around 30. I'm terrible at guessing ages, so I'm not sure. I don't remember much about how he looked. I think he was bald or had short hair, but being naive, I didn't think to memorize any details about him, which I definitely would have done if this happened to me now. When our eyes met, he asked me something like, "Got any weed?" At 15, I was a good kid. No smoking, no drinking, and definitely no hard drugs. I told him no, and just sat there, feeling uncomfortable, waiting for my bus. Then he pointed up at the bus schedule above the stairs to the platform and asked, "Where you heading?" As if him asking about drugs wasn't enough of a red flag, I still didn't think to keep my destination to myself. Like an idiot, I told him I was catching the 123 bus to XYZ. He replied, "Oh, me too," which I found a little hard to believe since it was a small town, but it wasn't impossible. Still, I was starting to get suspicious, and I was already super uneasy. I looked down at my phone, hoping he'd stop talking to me. He noticed me looking at my phone and asked, "What phone service you with?" I told him the service, and he said, "I got a voucher for phone credit for that service, but I can't use it because I'm with a different one." "Want it?" I politely said no, assuming he had some kind of ulterior motive, though I wasn't sure what he'd gained from giving me a voucher. Looking back, maybe he was trying to get my phone number or something. I don't know. He kept pushing, saying, "You sure? Why not? I can't use it." But I declined again. "No, thank you." Things got even weirder after that. He pointed at my platform boots and asked, "Is it hard to run in those shoes?" That was creepy as hell. I lied and said, "No, I can run really well in these." Then he gestured toward the stairs leading down to the bus platform and said, "Why don't we go down there to wait for the bus?" The platform was poorly lit, and there was probably no one down there. No way was I going to be alone with this guy. I told him, "I'm going to wait here, but you can go down if you want." As I expected, though, he didn't budge and stayed right there on the bench with me. A few moments later, I saw someone walking toward us through the bus station. Against all odds, it was someone I knew, my friend's older brother, Ben, who was maybe 17 at the time. I almost shouted when I saw him. He came over and stood in front of me on the bench. I asked him which bus he was catching, and thank God, it was the same one as mine. I was so relieved. We chatted for a bit, and the creepy guy next to me didn't say a word while Ben and I talked. Eventually, the guy got up and wandered off. Ben and I went down to the platform and got on the bus when it arrived. Surprisingly, the creepy guy didn't get on the bus like he said he would. I told Ben about what had happened and how he'd basically saved me. I can't even imagine what might have happened if Ben hadn't shown up when he did. I would have gone down to the platform when the bus came, and hopefully the guy wouldn't have tried anything since the bus driver was there. But if he'd gotten on the bus with me, I was worried about the 20-minute walk from my bus stop to my house. It's a dark street with bushland on one side, and I didn't have any credit on my phone to call my mom for a ride. I used to live in a market town in the United Kingdom, and like every town, we had our local mascot, that one person everyone knows about. Maybe it's the wild lady hooked on meth or the creepy drunk yelling at strangers. In our town, that person was Joe Johann, sometimes called Johann the Guitar Man by the locals. He was an average-sized guy with a dark beard and a cheerful vibe, super religious, a born-again Christian. You'd often spot him on street corners, speaking in tongues while strumming his guitar, or singing one of his songs, handing out posters covered in rainbow-colored text to passers-by. He'd wave at school kids and shake maracas at random moments. I guess you could call him a sort of pseudo-street preacher. To most people, he seemed harmless, though there were plenty of rumors about him floating around. At school, we get frequent stranger danger warnings about Johann. One story was that he'd been in a car crash and suffered severe brain damage. Another claimed he was set to study science at Cambridge University, but had a religious epiphany and gave it all up. The worst rumor, though, was that he'd raped a young girl and was so consumed by guilt that he lost his mind and turned to religion. There were also weird things Johann actually did. One July, for his birthday, he was handing out invitations on the street for a party at his place, a tiny apartment above a shop with "Jesus Loves You" painted on the outside wall. He invited tons of people, but I didn't go. I'm curious if anyone actually showed up. Locals generally thought Johann was nuts, but mostly harmless. Over the years, I collected a bunch of his posters. He'd occasionally pop into my workplace and we'd chat. I even got one of his CDs from him. I probably still have it somewhere. Even some teachers I knew would display his posters in their classrooms. I remember my English teacher had one up with rainbow-colored, size 36 font that read, "You are all wonderfully loved, clearly a gift from Johann." I had plenty of run-ins with Johann over the years, and most were fine, usually just a quick "Hi, Johann" as I passed on my way to work or school. Honestly, I did get odd vibes from him sometimes, but I brushed it off. He lived on my street, so we were neighbors, and I got used to seeing him around. But one day, things took a weird turn. He greeted me by name, which caught me off guard because I'd never told him my name. "Good morning, my dear sister Emma," he said. I wasn't too shocked. He knew the names of some of my friends, so maybe one of them mentioned me. I said hi back and told him I was doing okay. I didn't want to chat long since I was heading to a friend's house, so I tried to keep it brief. We talked about something trivial, probably the weather, and I made an excuse to leave. As I was wrapping up, he said, "May Jesus shower his ever-flowing love on you. Would you like me to bless you today, Sister Emma?" I thought it was kind of sweet, and hey, it'd be a funny story to tell my friend, right? Plus, it probably wouldn't take long. I hesitantly agreed. Johann set down his guitar, grabbed my hand, pretty roughly, I might add, and started chanting in tongues. It hurt. He scraped my wrist, and I noticed his nails were disgustingly long. I was definitely a little freaked out. The chanting got louder, then he switched to English. May the love of heaven flow over Emma, her descendants, and all those who care for her. May she find a loving husband to provide for her. May her demons be driven from her soul. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Bless her. Bless her. Bless her. During all the Jesus loves you and bless her parts, he was jumping up and down, still gripping my hand tightly, scratching me more. He was laughing like a maniac, totally caught up in it. Then he ended the blessing, if you can even call it that, with this wild, high-pitched mouth trumpeting sound, like he was mimicking a kazoo. If it wasn't so terrifying, I would have laughed. He finally let go of my hand. Shaking, I thanked him and walked away as fast as I could. I got to my friend's place, and we laughed about it, though I showed her my scratched-up wrist, and she was just as creeped out as I was. I didn't think he meant to hurt me, so we moved on and did whatever we planned to do that day. I eventually left town for university and forgot all about Johann. But then, through a friend on Facebook, I saw a link to the local news. Johann had been arrested and was facing trial for stalking and sending threatening messages to a girl around my age. Apparently, he was furious that she didn't return his advances after he wanted to be more than friends. The messages got disturbingly sexual, asking if she wanted a taste of his chocolate cake. He believed she was his wife, that their love was a sign from God, and that they were destined to be together. He even threatened to kill her, her boyfriend, and their families for crimes of adultery. It turned out he was buddies with some local gang members and was considering sending them to her and her boyfriend's home. One of his last letters to her said, "God unfortunately says that unless you give up your ways, he will have to execute you. You've seen all the thunder and lightning. Take that as a sign. It would take just one lightning bolt to finish you off, my lovely." What made it worse was that the girl went to my school, though not at the same time as me, and we'd worked at the same place. That made me question all the friendly chats Johann had with me and whether there was something sinister behind his rough hand grabbing. For the most part, I think he was a guy who needed help but was brushed off as harmless. It's a shame that me, my hometown, and that poor girl had to find out the hard way. He was eventually detained under the Mental Health Act, and I have to say, I'm relieved for him. I'll keep this as clear and detailed as possible, but my story needs some context to make sense. I'm 17 now and have been obsessed with mountaineering and the wilderness since I was a kid. This story happened in the summer of 2011 when I was about 11. My family, being the adventurous type, decided to climb Mount Rinjani in Indonesia, a massive volcano teeming with wildlife and dense forests. It wasn't unusual for us to go on these epic adventures. We were the kind of family that loved exploring. Our group was big, about 25 people in total. This encounter starts on the third and final day of our descent from the volcano. After roughly 7 hours of hiking, my uncle, 2 of my cousins, and I reached the bottom. I should mention that when we hiked, we split into smaller groups, or pods. My uncle, 2 cousins, and I were in the first pod, leading the way. The second pod, my 2 sisters, aunt, male cousin, and mom was behind us, and so on. Each pod was about 500 meters apart. Even though that's a decent distance, we were absolutely sure no one was between our pods since we all started at the same time, and there was only one path down from the summit. Here's where it gets creepy. We were waiting at the bottom for the second pod to arrive. After about 10 minutes, we heard loud screaming coming from the direction of the path. Then we saw my cousin Seb and my sister Sarah sprinting down the volcano, sheer terror in their eyes and their words coming out in gasps. What follows is their account of what happened, so bear with me if I'm not 100% precise. They were walking along the path, which was eerily flanked by dense tree lines on both sides, when they suddenly noticed a black bin bag hanging right in the middle of the trail, blocking their way. Growing up in Myanmar and knowing a fair bit about spirituality, my mom and aunt describe it as the kind of bag you might fill with chicken heads for witchcraft rituals, especially because of how it was placed, like it was meant to lure a tired traveler into touching it, triggering some kind of hex. They brushed it off as maybe a bag full of animal waste or something gross and kept going. A few hundred meters later, my sister and said to my mom and aunt, "Can you feel that?" No one said anything else, but they all knew what she meant. They later described it as a gnawing sense of dread, like someone or something was watching them. What happened next is still hard for my family to talk about. Seb whispered, "Guys, be very quiet and turn around." My sister and mom did, but my aunt refused, saying she was too scared to look. What they saw can only be described as something out of a myth. A pitch-black, dog-shaped creature emerged from the bushes about 20 meters behind them. They said it was massive, not tall, but incredibly muscular, far too big to be a village dog. It was jet black with stark white teeth, but the part that still gives me chills is this. Despite the distance, they could see it had bright yellow eyes. We own a Newfoundland, a solid 90-kilo dog that can be pretty intimidating, so when my mom says this thing was huge, I believe her. They kept walking with this creature hunting them, as they put it, for a good 5 minutes before it vanished into the shrubs. They took that as their cue to sprint for the bottom, which was now in sight. The final pod of about 6 people arrived just 5 minutes after the second pod, saying they didn't see any creature or the black bin bag. What baffles me is that our pod, the first one down, didn't see any sign of the bin bag or the creature. Since we were the first group on the only route down, and no other mountaineers came after us, that bag had to have been placed after we passed. And for the final pod not to see it, someone must have removed it after the second pod went by. That means some weirdo was up there tying bin bags to vines and then taking them down just to mess with people. Plus, the volcano was practically windless, so it couldn't have blown into place. This brings me to the big questions. What was that black dog creature? Was it connected to the creepy bin bag on the path? Has anyone else encountered something like this? After we got home, I looked for logical explanations. There are no recorded wild dogs in that part of Indonesia. My family sticks to their story to this day, and even though I'm usually a skeptic, I can't help but believe them. I talked to my cousin Seb about it a couple of weeks ago. He's a big guy, 6 feet 2 inches, rugby player, but he said that thing filled him with pure dread, like it was evil. He felt like they were being hunted. What chilled me even more was when he mentioned he distinctly remembered whistling before they saw the creature, and it didn't have a tail. I've heard those are signs of skinwalkers. 2 months later, a close family friend who was on the trek was diagnosed with brain cancer. He passed away last week. My family can't help but wonder if that black dog had something to do with it. I know it sounds crazy, but with everything feeling so connected, I don't know what to think anymore. When I was about 18, I worked as a nursing assistant on a surgical floor. We saw all kinds of patients, from gallbladder surgeries to knee replacements. I worked alongside another assistant, and we split the floor in half. She took one hallway, I took the other. One night, she went on break, so I handled the call lights for both hallways. One of her patients was ringing, so I went to help. The patient's son stepped out while I assisted his mother to the bedside. When I finished, I stepped out and told him he could go back in. Instead, he started talking to me. We exchanged some small talk, and he returned to his mother's room when she called for him. When my coworker returned, I went back to my duties. Later, I was charting at the nurse's station when the son came out and started chatting with me again. I didn't think much of it. It was the middle of the night, nothing good was on TV, and I figured he was just bored. When I got up to check on my patients, he followed me, asking questions like how old I was, if I was in school, how long I'd worked there. He even waited outside patient rooms until I came out. I should mention, this guy didn't give off the usual creeper vibe. He was clean-cut, maybe in his late 20s, charming and funny. I guess his appearance dulled my creep radar, and I brushed off his behavior as social awkwardness. He kept following me, talking nonstop. I tried dropping subtle hints about having a boyfriend, even though I didn't. Toward the end of my shift, he got more aggressive. He said, "Well, I guess I'll just have to kill him," referring to the boyfriend I'd mentioned. He laughed it off, then said he'd walk me to my car when my shift ended. After that, he went to check on his mother. By then, I was creeped out. When my shift ended, I gave report to the day shift assistants and told my coworker about the son. She checked the hallway before we left, and we took a lesser-known route to the parking garage. I went home, crashed, and around noon, the day shift charge nurse called. She told me not to come in. The son had been asking about me when I worked what my real name was, personal stuff. When she wouldn't tell him, he asked other nurses. His mother was being discharged that day, so the nurse said I could probably return tomorrow. But the next day, my manager called and told me to stay home for the rest of the week. The son had sent flowers to the floor and called every unit, asking about me and my schedule. My manager didn't think it was safe for me to come back. Eventually, he stopped calling, and I returned to work. About 3 months later, I was watching the news. The son had been arrested for rape and murder. Recently, I got pulled over by a cop in my current Texas town and let off with just a warning. My infraction? Not signaling a lane change. Probably not a big deal, but anyway. We chatted, and he was attractive, friendly enough. I cracked some jokes, he did too, and I played the innocent white girl card to get out of a ticket. It worked. He asked for my info to fill out the warning citation, and I went on my way. But then he followed me to my destination, my friend's house just down the street. Weird, but I figured maybe he thought I'd been drinking or something. I brushed it off and forgot about it. That is, until the next day when he texted me, asking me out, using the phone number he'd taken from the citation. I've been in a relationship for 4 years, so I wasn't interested. I ignored the text, and then I just got pissed. I already don't have the best opinion of cops, and getting my number like that felt shady, like an abuse of power. So I reported him. I showed them the text, but big surprise, his message was worded to imply I'd given him my number willingly. Even less surprising, that was his story when they questioned him. So, yeah, nothing came of it. Probably not this cowboy's first rodeo, and he covered his ass well. That pissed me off even more. Now, I see him parked on my street about once a week. 2 days ago, I got in my car, and a block from my house, it started shaking. I pulled over and found one of my lug nuts was missing, and the others had been loosened. My one was about to come off. That's when it hit me. I need to be more vigilant about switching up my routine. I'd seen that cop parked on my street the night before, after getting home from a late shift at work. 9 times out of 10, I go home, shower, let my dog out, then head to my friend's place to crack a beer and do some homework for a few hours before bed. But that night, my friend picked me up instead. If this cop was watching me and messing with my car, he'd have known I'd only make it halfway down the road before breaking down. He could have swooped in to help. Luckily, I deviated from my usual routine and didn't notice or drive my car until 5 p.m. the next day. I know I sound paranoid as shit, but I'm pretty sure I might be getting stalked or screwed with by a cop I rejected and reported. I got no evidence yet, but I've already ordered dash cams and another camera for outside my house. I know the police department here wouldn't believe me, even if it's true. Being the child of a police officer, I was expected to fit one of 2 molds. Either a goody two-shoes who never got in trouble, or a spoiled brat who got away with everything because daddy always bailed me out. I was the former, which caused me plenty of problems. I was straight-laced for most of my life, never smoked, only tried alcohol when I turned 21, had just 1 speeding ticket, and never even got sent to the principal's office. But that supposed innocence was a cover for a lot of secrets I kept. I dated a guy named Kale, who was 3 years older than me. Kale was 18 when we started going out, but mentally he was more like 14 or 15. Even now, at 21, I still surprise people when they learn my age. Dating Kale got both of us into a lot of trouble, though not for the reasons you might think. Kale still lived with his parents and had never moved out on his own. I was 19 at the time and helping him look for a place to live. He was 22 or 23. I told him I'd keep an eye out for options. It just so happened that my friend Sierra needed a roommate to help support her and her boyfriend Tyler. Tyler was 10 years older than both of us, and Sierra's parents despised him. Despite being my age, Sierra already had 1 kid and another on the way. She was 16 when she had her first child, and Tyler was the father. I didn't think much about them until I ran into them on my way home from school one day. I was walking to the bus stop to get to college since I didn't have a license or a car yet. They seemed happy and were super welcoming. Sierra was a friend from school, so I didn't see any harm in stopping to chat. Even though Tyler had only just met me, he was already hinting that he wanted me to move in with him as a roommate. With a new baby coming, they needed to make sure they could cover expenses. I thought it was a brilliant idea and called Kale to tell him about it. Kale was a bit hesitant, so I arranged for them to meet. I'll admit, I was pretty naive about this and thought I was doing what was best for Kale. But things went south fast. After just a month, Kale was set to move in. Once he did, Tyler changed. He became aggressive toward Kale, even lighting his hand on fire at one point. Kale wasn't hurt, but he lost a lot of arm hair. Tyler constantly mocked him and got overly sexual with Sierra whenever Kale was around. When I visited, Tyler would make passes at me and ask intrusive questions about our sex life. The final straw was when Sierra and Tyler got into a screaming match, and he shoved her so hard she fell on her stomach. The baby was fine, but when I went to help her up, I saw how many bruises she had. I didn't call the police that night because Sierra begged me not to. She said she still loved Tyler and couldn't raise her kids without him. She'd grown up without a father and didn't want that for her children. Kale and I agreed he needed to get out of there. He started making plans to pack, and we were going to sneak his stuff out when Tyler wasn't home. But Tyler seemed to catch on and asked if I wanted to move in too, noticing all the boxes. Not wanting to set him off, I stayed quiet, another mistake. He took my silence as a yes and kept pressing me about moving in. The less I responded, the angrier he got, calling and texting me constantly. When I said I was at work, he demanded to know my schedule so I could talk to him. He kept bringing up the unborn baby and how he needed financial help. I finally told Sierra and Tyler I'd never live with them and that they were on their own. Kale had everything ready to go and just needed a truck to move his stuff. That's when shit hit the fan. The next morning, I got text from Kale saying Tyler and Sierra were talking about beating the hell out of me and that I should take a different route to school. I still hadn't told my parents about any of this because I didn't want Sierra or Kale to get in trouble for Tyler's actions. I should have called the police then, but I figured nothing would happen on a quick 1.5 mile walk to school, right? I started walking, but halfway there, I saw Tyler sitting on the side of the road, waiting. I kept going, not even glancing at him. He shouted after me, following. We were on the sidewalk of a busy highway, so if he tried anything, there'd be plenty of witnesses. I think that's the only reason he didn't get closer. Then I heard him yell, "I'll beat the shit out of you." Something in me snapped. I stopped, turned around, and stared him down. You do realize my dad's a cop, right? He froze, then rolled his eyes. Sierra's uncle is a cop, and he outranks your dad. I'll shoot you, and I'll shoot your dad. I know where you live, where you go to school, how you get there, and where you work. Call the cops, and I'll get to you before they get to me. I turned around, gripping my bag so hard my knuckles went white. I ducked into the fast food restaurant where Kale worked and called the police, my hands shaking the whole time. I stayed there until a cop car showed up. Tyler was arrested a few hours later. I got a flood of texts from Sierra saying she'd never forgive me. How could I do this? I didn't back down, and the charges went through. Tyler pled guilty, and I got an order of protection against him. It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't do much, but it's comforting to know it's in writing that he can't come near me. That was the first and only time I've called the police, and I hope I never have to again. This is a story about a creep, a guy who thought he held all the power in the world. A creep who probably had a rough childhood, but a creep nonetheless. I first connected with him online back in 2011 on Facebook. We had mutual friends, people I trusted, so I figured he was a decent guy. Big mistake. You can't just assume someone's cool because of shared connections, but I was a naive 18-year-old girl. His name was Denny. At first, I thought he was alright. He had great taste in music and shared some awesome songs with me. He was also hilariously inappropriate, always cracking jokes and telling wild stories. I grew to enjoy chatting with him. He never asked if I had a boyfriend, and I assumed he knew I did. We were Facebook friends after all, and my profile was full of pictures with my boyfriend. My relationship status was public, right there for anyone to see. But I guess he missed that. One day in October, he decided to confess his feelings. He sent me a poem he'd written, comparing me to a beautifully handcrafted tapestry. Keep in mind, I never met this guy in person, and we'd only been talking for about a month. I replied with something like, "Wow, I wish my boyfriend said stuff like that." He flipped out, got so angry. He asked how I could lead him on like this, how I could do this to him. He said he'd poured his heart out, begged and pleaded, and supposedly even cried. I was completely confused. I decided to give him some space, and it worked for a few days. But then he messaged me again. He might have apologized, but I don't recall that conversation clearly. Things went back to normal, though, and he was silly and fun again. By then, I had his Skype, and he had mine. We'd chat there sometimes, but I never used the camera. I wasn't comfortable with it. I hated video calls with anyone. I told him that when he started pushing me to use it, but he wouldn't let up. I kept making excuses, but Denny wasn't having it. He got more aggressive, then started getting sexual, telling me to Skype naked with him. I said no over and over. Eventually, I blocked him on Skype, but then I got dozens of angry messages on AIM. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I have screenshots saved on an external hard drive somewhere. They were hateful, unhinged, and called me a terrible friend. Before long, he started bragging about being an excellent hacker with a crew of hacker friends. He threatened to change my college grades, make me fail, and turn my life into a living hell. I didn't fully believe him, but I was convinced he'd try something. Despite these blow-ups, he'd still have moments of being silly and normal. During those times, I felt safe, and I tried to keep him happy to stay on his good side. I genuinely believe he'd try to ruin my reputation otherwise. Soon, he started giving me ultimatums. Either you get on Skype with me, or things will get bad for you. I can tell your boyfriend you're cheating on him. I asked our mutual friends about him, and they said he was violent, dangerous, and twisted. Even worse, he lived just minutes away from the college we both attended in Pennsylvania. I started panicking about going to campus. I'd scan the crowds for guys with long red hair and beards, wary of anyone who even vaguely looked like him. I was convinced he'd show up and try to find me. I blocked him on M and made a new Skype account, knowing it would piss him off. And it did. I got another round of Facebook messages about how I needed to treat people better. I told him I was uncomfortable with what he was asking, and he replied, "Fine, you've chosen your fate." I blocked him on Facebook. I was done with him terrorizing me, but I should have known it wouldn't end there. At the end of November, I got 3 Facebook messages from someone named Adam Knowing. His account was brand new, with no friends or content. The messages read, November 27th, 2011. You've been warned repeatedly, and you are now being served notice. November 29th, 2011. I believe this is your last warning, and that you've been informed of your behavioral issues. The situation will change before the start of next weekend, or action will be taken. November 30th, 2011. So you attend college, right? And your grades are passing. Not for long. You were warned on how to treat him and how you are to act. You've got until this weekend to correct this behavior, or life becomes a very difficult thing. You should never treat someone who has a life like this the way that you do. I still don't know who Adam Knowing was. Maybe Denny. Maybe one of his shady hacker friends. Either way, I was terrified. Against my better judgment, I unblocked Denny on Facebook. By then, my boyfriend knew what was going on and suggested I contact the police if things got worse. Maybe I should have, but Denny hadn't actually done anything concrete. What could they do? Still, I saved everything. Screenshots of his screen names, our AIM chat logs, his threatening messages. I stored it all in a folder, just in case I needed evidence. Denny's nonsense continued through Christmas. Some days, he was sweet and funny. Others, he was back to being angry and pushy. I promised him a Skype session to calm him down, but kept using schoolwork as an excuse to stall. Right after Christmas, I blocked him again on all platforms. I decided I'd deal with whatever consequences came. If he hacked me, at least I had the evidence, right? A couple of weeks passed, and nothing happened. Then I got a Facebook message from another random account. I don't recall the name, but the message stuck with me. After careful consideration, you're being let go. You may not want to do the respectful thing and thank the one you have wronged. It is thanks to his compassion that you are being forgiven so easily. I blocked the account immediately. In January 2012, something incredible happened. I woke up to news that Denny had been arrested. The charges? Possession and distribution of child pornography. A bunch of his creepy friends were arrested too, caught up in the same mess. In 2013, Denny was indicted. He's facing up to 60 years, which would make him nearly 90 by the time he gets out. Even if he's released early, he'll be supervised for life. I'm not sure if I can share the news article, but it's out there. Guess being a creep catches up with you eventually. One night, my mom took my siblings and me to a Chinese buffet, and we had a blast. We laughed, ate, and poked fun at Mom's hilarious accent when she spoke English. We even passed around photos, feeling like nothing could go wrong. But boy, were we in for a surprise. After paying, we walked home, joking the whole way, and trying to decipher our fortune cookies. We unlocked the door, climbed the stairs, still giggling, with my little sister tagging along. We kept messing around until we reached the room next to the living room, where we froze. My sister grabbed my arm, whispering, "Someone was here. I know it." She pointed at the bunk bed, specifically at a corner where the sheet was slightly messed up. I rolled my eyes. Mom probably bumped the covers. You weren't the last one in here before we left, right? But she kept tugging at me, certain something was off. She scanned the room and pointed at a broomstick. Okay, I didn't leave that there. Now I was confused. Sure, anyone could have moved it, but earlier that day, we cleaned the whole house. After we finished, we put all the cleaning supplies in the closet by the kitchen. This room was a hallway and 2 rooms away from that closet. I brushed it off, telling my sister she was being paranoid, and dragged her toward the bedroom we shared. I opened the door, stepped in first, and stopped dead in my tracks, blocking her from seeing inside. I pushed her back and told her to call Mom. When Mom came, I walked into the room. Our window was smashed open, a brick sitting on the cabinet. Shattered glass was scattered on the floor, some trailing away from the window, like it had stuck to the intruder's shoes. Mom rushed in, gasped, and ushered my sister and me out. She told my other 2 siblings to check the house for anything missing. A few minutes later, we realized Mom's spare purse full of documents was gone, along with a knife, some of our YMCA IDs, and creepily, some of Mom's undergarments. The suspect? Mom's ex-boyfriend, who she'd recently fought with and dumped. The police were called, and they put out a search for him. He wasn't at his place, so they started looking around the area. Mom called a friend to come keep us company since we were all pretty shaken. Our friend, who we called V, brought her kids, and we started watching movies while the adults talked quietly about what happened. A few hours later, V got up to use the bathroom and heard a noise coming from my older sister's room. The whole house was dark per police orders, so she was basically blind as she walked in. She didn't see anything odd at first, but then she heard the noise again, coming from the closet. She opened it and nearly screamed when she saw Mom's ex standing there. He quietly asked for his damn pants, which he'd left in the bathroom. Still in shock, she grabbed them, told him to get the hell out, and he did. V told Mom, who immediately called the cops again to report that he'd been in our house the whole time. Turns out, he was probably in the bathroom when we got home, panicked, and hid in my sister's closet, waiting for a chance to slip out. The police eventually caught him. I refused to sleep in that bedroom until the window was fixed. Mom got a restraining order against him, but she never got her stuff back. I've completely forgotten what he looks like, but my siblings sometimes spot him when we're out shopping. Thankfully, he stays far away from us. This happened back in 2001 when our family moved to our new house. I was 8 years old, and my sister was 10. Since we just settled in, Mom was eager to get some new furniture to spruce up our first real home. We weren't well off, but she wanted it to feel special. We drove to a small discount furniture shop with plenty of options. Of course, my sister and I, being typical siblings, were goofing off. She called me an ugly freak, and I shot back that her face was fat, just normal kid stuff. Mom couldn't find anything she liked, so we left empty-handed. As we got into the car, Mom decided to stop by the grocery store to grab a few things so the trip wasn't a total bust. My sister and I noticed a brown car tailing us, matching every turn and light. We pointed it out to Mom, but she brushed it off, saying, "Don't worry about it, guys." We were young, so we let it go and forgot about it. At the store, we grabbed snacks, got back in the car, and headed home. Sure enough, the brown car was behind us again. Mom started to get worried, especially since we lived in another town 20 miles away. She tried to reassure us, suggesting it might be someone we knew, like a relative from the area. We had family in town, just not anyone we were close to. But the car kept following, mimicking our route. The closer we got to home, the more paranoid Mom became, which made us nervous too. She told us to jot down the license plate, but kept saying it was probably our cousin Jessica or someone. When we pulled into our driveway, the car parked right behind us, engine still running. Mom ordered us to stay in the car while she went to talk to our cousin. My sister and I watched from the back window as Mom approached. After a few minutes, we heard the woman in the car yelling, pointing at us in the car, and then at Mom. She peeled out of the driveway, nearly running over Mom's feet. Mom came back, crying hysterically, and rushed us into the house. She shoved us into our room and talked to Dad, though we could hear everything. Apparently, the woman thought my sister and I had been insulting her at the furniture store. She threatened to throw nails in our driveway and poison our dogs. She demanded that Mom punish us for talking to a stranger like that and said if she had the chance, she'd break our little necks if she heard us talking about her again. Dad wasn't thrilled that Mom had let her follow us all the way home, but figured it wasn't a big deal. The next day, my sister and I were walking to our bus stop when we saw the brown car parked across the street from our house. My sister bolted back inside to tell Dad. He walked us to the bus stop and waited until we were safely on the bus. Mom wanted to do something, but Dad thought the police wouldn't act since it was just threats. The creepy, stalkerish behavior continued unchecked. The woman started showing up every morning, watching us at the bus stop. She'd even come onto our property to make her presence known. Mom found a bottle of antifreeze near the dog's fenced-in area, unopened, but suspicious. We started bringing their bowls inside every night, just in case. Food wrappers and half-empty soda cups were tossed onto our lawn. The air valve caps and lug nuts on our tires went missing. One of our outdoor cats died, but we couldn't prove why. Then my older brother did something really dumb. Dad was tired of walking us to the bus stop, so he asked my brother to do it. Spotting the car in its usual spot, my brother decided the smart move was to flip her off. That set her off. She jumped out of the car, screaming and cursing, saying we were crazy and needed to learn our place as kids. She was spitting, threatening to beat us while I was crying my eyes out. My brother picked me up because I was frozen in place. We stayed home that day, and Mom finally called the police. We gave them the license plate number, and they said they'd visit her in a day or two. Mom didn't tell me much, but I know they confronted her. She went on a rant about how kids are just dirty bastards and she'd kill every last one if she could. They didn't arrest her, but a few days later, the police called Mom to say the woman had been admitted to a psych ward. After that, we got no more details, and we never heard from her again. A bit about me first. I'm still fairly new to my big city in Texas. I've got a great boyfriend, a decent job, and some solid friends. I don't make enemies easily. I'm polite to everyone and generally pretty outgoing. 4 months now, I've had this nagging feeling like I'm being watched. It got so bad that I got a dog. As much as I love my cat, he's not exactly protective or comforting. The first major incident happened 3 weeks ago when my car was broken into at work. It's not unheard of there, so while I was upset, I chalked it up to random vandalism. But the next day, As I went through my car, things got weirder. They pulled my GPS out of the pocket on the passenger seat, looked at it, and tossed it back. I had several expensive Coach purses stashed under the seat, and they'd been pulled out but left behind. The only thing missing was an old red bra and a bag with some random clothes I'd thrown in the back ages ago. A few days later, I noticed a long scratch running down the length of my passenger side door. At first, I thought I might have done it, but I'm almost never on that side of the car. The more I thought about it, the more I realized someone must have keyed it. A week or so after that, I went to check my mail, which I don't do often. My monthly rent reminder check was already opened, not just poorly sealed, but torn open with a reminder hanging out. A few nights later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to someone at my door. My dog Nova was growling, and I heard someone trying to turn the handle and scratching at it. Nova went nuts, barking like crazy, which woke me up fully. I was frozen, but her barking seemed to scare them off. I didn't report it to the complex. Stupid, I know. I should also mention that my complex had sent an email a little earlier about suspicious activity in the area, saying they were keeping a closer eye out. At this point, I always felt uneasy walking Nova on the trails behind my complex and never felt safe in my apartment. I started staying at my boyfriend's place for about a week, hoping it was all just bad luck or coincidence. That brings me to a few days ago. I had to get to work an hour early, and mine was the only car in the parking lot. About an hour later, a coworker called to say my car had been broken into again. Since it had happened before, I handled it quickly. Called the cops, insurance, the works. When the police showed up, I went out to meet them. I told them nothing was taken and that this was the second break-in in a month. They exchanged a look and asked if anything was taken the first time. I mentioned the red bra. They pointed out the key marks, and I told them those showed up around the same time as the first break-in. One cop pointed out more scratches that weren't there before, wrapping around the back of the car and over the taillights to the other side. Then they started asking questions. Do you have an angry ex-boyfriend? Is anyone upset with you? These aren't typical break-ins. Has anything else weird happened? Anything at all? Try not to panic. I told them about everything. The mail, the door incident, all of it. They looked at each other again, and the second cop said, I don't want to freak you out, but you should get some mace, a knife, or a gun for protection. Someone's clearly out to hurt you. They left it at that and took off. I was freaking out and called my boss, who's also my uncle's girlfriend. I told her what the cop said, and she said she'd be there in 15 minutes to talk. I filled her in, and she explained that these were signs of a stalker, a real stalker who's out to get me. She used to be a news anchor and had dealt with stalkers before. She said these were warning signs that they were escalating. So, to wrap up, I'm staying with my boyfriend or my boss. My boss has me scheduled to only work when others are around. A male coworker walks me to and from my car every morning and night, and I can't leave during the day. I'm supposed to call the cops if anything feels off. My parents are losing it and want me to move back to Boston. Update. This morning, while walking Nova, I noticed new key marks on my door. They definitely weren't there yesterday. Update. I stayed in my apartment last night for the first time in a week because the complex was doing random inspections and I needed to clean in case they picked mine. When I left this morning, all my lights were off. But during my work break, I stopped by and found my bedroom and bathroom lights on. Since it was inspection day, I called the complex to ask if they'd been in my apartment and left the lights on. They hadn't inspected my place, which means someone else was in there while I was at work. I called the cops, and they added this to my case file. Let me start by apologizing for being a bit light on details. This isn't my story. It was told to me by my aunt during a family reunion up north one Memorial Day, back in the late 90s or early 2000s. My aunt worked in a typical office with cubicles, water cooler gossip, and the occasional copy machine jam. But the guy in the cubicle next to her, Thomas, was far from ordinary. He was the office weirdo, the kind of guy who put everyone on edge, the one coworkers whispered might snap one day, the guy nobody wanted to be alone with. Being his cubicle neighbor, my aunt had to deal with a lot of his odd behavior. Sometimes he'd peek over the divider and just stare at her. Other times, he'd make creepy comments about female coworkers' appearances. One thing that really stood out was the whimpering she'd hear from his side of the cubicle, like he was quietly crying. It wasn't outright threatening, but it was enough to make her uneasy around him. One day, Thomas was gone. His cubicle was cleared out, and the office buzzed with gossip. Word got around that he'd been fired, charged, and convicted for making threatening phone calls to a couple of female co-workers, including a rape threat. On top of that, hidden surveillance cameras set up during the investigation revealed that the strange whimpering my aunt heard wasn't him crying. It was him masturbating in his cubicle. He was sentenced to 75 days in prison with 3 years of parole. My aunt thought, good riddance, and moved on with her life. A few years later, she was watching the news one night when a story caught her attention. Thomas had been arrested again, this time linked to the murder of a 9-year-old girl in Tahoe. As the case unfolded and the media dug deeper, a flood of disturbing details came to light. The bad vibes everyone at the office had felt about Thomas were justified. He was far worse than anyone had imagined. The trial revealed that Thomas had been sexually abusing his son TJ since he was 5 or 6 years old. As TJ grew older, Thomas manipulated him into bringing young girls to their home for him to molest, including TJ's own girlfriends. Eventually, Thomas dragged TJ so deep into his depravity that it led to TJ luring a 9-year-old girl to their apartment, where Thomas brutally raped and murdered her. TJ even covered for his father when the girl's parents came looking for her, while her body was tied up in a back bedroom. Later, they dumped her lifeless body down an embankment by the highway. It was a horrific tragedy. A bright young girl lost her life, but finally led to Thomas's capture. He was convicted, and in 2001, he died in prison. No one will ever have the misfortune of crossing paths with him again. I graduated high school almost a year ago and had zero interest in college or the military. I ended up stuck in my dull hometown for months, slipping into a cycle of Xanax and booze, feeling like I was doomed to repeat the same dead-end path as my parents and their parents before them. I knew I had to get out, so I signed up for a website you might know called WWF, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. You pay a small fee, and they give you access to a directory of organic farms that'll feed you and let you live with them in exchange for some work. I picked a Hare Krishna community deep in the south. When I got there, my car, a 30-year-old Chevy Blazer I snagged off Craigslist for $500, broke down almost immediately. $100 later, I found out it was beyond repair. The nearest town was 20 miles away, so I was stranded, surrounded by the most insufferable hipsters you can imagine. To break it down, about a third of the community were first or second generation Indian immigrants living near the temple for religious reasons. Another chunk were aging hippies, also there for spiritual stuff, running the small organic farm on the property. Everyone else? Smug, condescending, fresh out of college, vaping hipsters. I'm mostly kept to myself, but every now and then, I get dragged into conversations about vibrating crystals or their 3-year spiritual journey, obviously bankrolled by their parents. I'd been there for weeks, desperate for a real conversation, when Michael showed up. I'd heard about Michael a few days before I arrived. He'd left to get an impounded car from a city about an hour away. People said he was lazy, unhinged, and spent hours in his room doing yoga instead of helping with farm work. When he rolled in late one evening, he was rambling about how he was going to dive into farming and throw himself into Krishna consciousness. He was in his early 30s, looked like a balding, disheveled guy with wild, unwashed sideburns, and talked like a stoner cartoon character, tossing in and like to give his fried brain time to catch up. He reminded me of some of the buddies I'd left back home. We hit it off fast. He was the only person there who didn't make me want to chew my fingers off when we talked. Both from Texas, we bonded over stories about our crazy conservative high school teachers, football, and, of course, drugs. Every so often, though, he'd bring up stuff that threw me off. He couldn't get his car out of the impound lot, so he started scheming ways to break it out, plans involving guns, pipe bombs, and freaking telepathy. He told me he came to the Hare Krishna temple to cozy up to the gurus and learn Reiki meditation, which he said could control people's minds and bodies. He even claimed he'd used Reiki once to seduce a woman at a party. That's when I got why people thought he was nuts. I just nod and chuckle during these rants, figuring I could handle a bit more of his weirdness for another week or so. A couple of days later, we were eating lunch with one of the gurus. I was telling Michael about a trip I took to the huge field where the Branch Davidians used to be. He didn't know who they were, so I explained the whole Waco mess, David Koresh, the botched siege by the FBI and ATF, and how it ended with 76 Davidians and 4 ATF agents dead. Michael lost it. The government's always trying to silence people preaching the truth. That's so screwed up. I tried to explain that Koresh was a sociopathic cult leader obsessed with power, but he wasn't having it. Now I was pissed. He was throwing a tantrum about something I just explained, telling me I was wrong and Koresh was some kind of martyr. That's when I saw the real, unhinged Michael. His face turned red as a beet, and he started pacing back and forth, spitting as he ranted. I left the table and got back to work, but he followed me. After an hour of his nonsense, I snapped. I'm not arguing with a damn lunatic, Michael. How can I expect logic from someone who came here to get superpowers? The look in his eyes shifted from anger to pure hatred. He went dead still, then came at me. Michael was a big guy, way bigger than me. He lunged, and I bolted. As I ran, I fumbled in my pocket, praying I'd grab my knife before leaving my cabin. I know it sounds extreme, but you didn't walk my old neighborhood without some kind of protection, and it was handy on the farm too. Luckily, I had it. I turned around, holding it so he'd see it. He stopped, stared for 3 seconds, then turned and went back to finish his lunch. The next day, I pulled the temple president aside and told him what happened, saying we needed to get rid of Michael. It didn't take much convincing. Nobody liked him, and he was useless on the farm. I felt a little guilty snitching. He was in a rough spot, no car, no money, and probably no friends. The temple president also told me Michael had been an alcoholic for 10 years and came to the temple to get sober, which was weird since he never mentioned it to me. Later that day, I saw someone drive up through my window and hand Michael a few suitcases. He packed what little he had, and they drove off to who knows where. Weeks passed, and the whole thing started to fade from my mind. But one night, I got a text. "Hey, this is Michael. We can get our car for $280. Want to go traveling?" I didn't respond. I had no clue how he got my number. Maybe he found me on Facebook or something. A few nights later, I was in the temple office using the Wi-Fi to send some emails. On my walk back to my cabin, I heard loud banging coming from a barn in the pitch-black darkness. I figured it was an animal, but it'd have to be a big one to make that much noise. I got to my cabin, which didn't have a lock on the main door, but my bedroom did, so I locked that. The banging had me rattled, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Later that night, I woke up needing to pee. The cabin didn't have a bathroom, just a shared outhouse. I didn't feel like putting on shoes and stumbling around in the dark, so I decided to just use the sink. I know it's gross, but I was the only one using that kitchen. I opened my bedroom door and nearly lost it right there. Michael, completely naked, was crouching in a corner of my kitchen, facing the wall. I let out a sound I didn't know I could make, something straight out of Scooby-Doo. The noise snapped him out of whatever he was doing. He turned, glared at me, and shook his whole body. I slammed my door and locked it. It hit me he was trying to mess with my head, probably with that Reiki nonsense he was obsessed with. I called 911. I didn't open my door or go near it until I saw red and blue lights outside my window. When the cops got there, Michael was gone. My guess is he ran into the woods around the farm. I explained our history and what happened that night, but there wasn't much they could do since no one knew much about him. I had to leave the farm soon after. Calling the police was a big no-no. Some of the old hippies acted like they were still dodging the draft. Honestly, I didn't mind leaving. I couldn't sleep knowing Michael might be out there in the woods, angrier than ever. I stayed up for almost 3 days straight until my friend came to pick me up. This happened just over a week ago, and now that the initial shock and paranoia have settled a bit, I'm ready to share what went down. I'm a 21-year-old woman, and I live in a medium-sized town near the city center, but in a fairly quiet neighborhood. My apartment building is mostly home to elderly people and families, so the main doors are always locked. You either need a key or someone to buzz you in to get inside. Once you're in, there's a staircase, and at each mid-floor, there are small balconies. I live on the 3rd floor, and you can see right into my bedroom from the balcony on the 2nd floor. One more thing before I dive into the story. My building is behind a big school, so there's nothing but a large, empty parking lot in front of it. Because of that, I usually don't bother closing my curtains. Now, on to what happened. It was the night between Wednesday and Thursday, and I didn't have work the next day, so I was chilling, watching YouTube on my tablet. I heard some noises from the hallway, heavy footsteps, and the occasional sound of someone bumping into the handrail, like they were drunk or exhausted. It wasn't anything unusual. I live in a building with other people, so you hear stuff at night sometimes. But things got weird when the footsteps stopped on my floor. My bedroom wall, right by the head of my bed, is against the staircase on the other side, so it was clear someone had stopped there. I didn't hear any doors opening or more footsteps, just silence. It was unsettling, knowing someone was just standing in the hallway in the middle of the night. After a while, I heard footsteps again, but quieter and more careful this time, heading back down the stairs. I figured maybe someone was drunk and got the wrong staircase or something. No big deal, they were gone. I went back to my YouTube marathon for a bit until I started feeling sleepy. One thing I love doing before bed is staring out my window. There's a main road at the end of the parking lot, and I like watching cars pass by as I wind down. So I put on some quiet music and started my little staring session. During the second song, I noticed a small light and some movement in the bottom left corner of my vision. I glanced down and froze. There was a man on the 2nd floor balcony staring into my bedroom for who knows how long. I was in just a t-shirt and underwear. After what felt like forever but was probably a few seconds, I snapped out of it, yanked the blind shut, and rushed to check that both my apartment doors were locked. Thank God they were. I crawled back into bed, shaking, and realized the man was probably the same person I'd heard in the hallway. He might have heard me awake in my apartment, lingered to listen, then noticed the balcony, and decided to check it out. He could have seen into my room since I had a small light on, it was dark outside, and my curtains were open. Even if he hadn't seen me before, he definitely did when I was staring out the window, blissfully unaware I was being watched. My racing thoughts were interrupted by the sound of someone trying to open my door. My door is pretty secure, so I didn't think he could get in, but then I heard the letterbox on the outer door being opened, slowly and quietly. I can still feel the hair on my neck standing up just thinking about it. Thank God I have 2 doors, so he couldn't see into my apartment, but I could hear him. He was breathing heavily, swallowing hard, like he was nervous or disturbed. I think I held my breath and turned into a statue until he finally closed the letterbox and, for some reason, sprinted down the stairs, making a ton of noise. I heard the hallway door open, and I assumed he ran out. I didn't dare look out the window to check. I still felt like I was being watched. Nothing else happened that night, but I sure as hell didn't sleep. I called my mom and told her everything. She had work the next day, so I didn't want to mess up her sleep by asking her to come over or pick me up. We agreed to keep a Viber call open all night. I chugged 2 energy drinks, not the smartest move when your heart's already racing. I stayed up until it was light outside and normal people were awake. I eventually passed out from exhaustion. I haven't seen the man since, at least not up to now as I'm writing this, and I hope I never do. But something else happened that made me even more paranoid. The next time I had work on Monday morning, I was already a mess from not sleeping well and had an early start. When I opened my inner apartment door to leave, I saw the outer door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I felt like running to my mom's house and curling up somewhere safe, but I had to go to work. All day, I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like someone was watching me, like they were coming for me. I'm so grateful for those 2 doors. He'd managed to quietly open the outer one, and if I'd been passed out inside, he could have gotten in and done anything. I reported both incidents to the building management, and we filed a police report together. They promised to have someone patrol the premises for a while until things calmed down. I'm still staying at my mom's house, hoping I'll feel safe enough to go back home eventually and shake this paranoia. I won't be leaving my curtains open or staring out the window at night for a long time. Running a library isn't as simple as people think. You'd be shocked at how many assume librarians just sit around reading all day. They have no clue about the endless tasks that pile up. In a single day, my mom might teach a computer class for seniors, help four families track down their ancestors' graves, catalog 1,000 new books, reshelve returns, host a story time for kids, and that's just the start. My point is, it takes someone with a degree and years of experience to keep a library running, and I'm not that person. My mom has